All righty. Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Thank you so much for joining us for our next edition of Tournament Talk. This edition is specifically speaking to the upcoming industry conferences and preparations and just maximizing your time and money spent going to these conferences for yourself and your staff. So this is industry-wide. This is for if you're a CVB or sports commission, if you're events rights holders, if you are a third-party vendor like we are, offering services like housing. Just really wanted to hit all of the different markers across the board so that we can help as many people in our industry as we possibly can. So I'm going to turn this over to Jason to introduce everybody and to get us rocking and rolling today. So thank you all for being here.
Hey everybody, Jason Puckett. I'm the Business Development Director for Elusive Travel, and have a great panel here today with some friends and colleagues from over the years, and really just wanted to talk about this upcoming conference schedule and how you can maximize your time. Like Laura said, we're going to record this to be able to send out to other folks, and we're just all excited to be able to get together and really, hit sports tourism again and pound the pavement and meet with the folks in our industry. So I wanted to go around real quick and let everyone introduce themselves. So I'll start with Shelby.
Good morning, afternoon. I'm Shelby Connett. I'm the Director of Sports at Visit Sarasota County.
And Shelby, can you share kind of what your main focus is?
Yes, so I've been with Visit Sarasota for about 9 years. We are a destination or a CVB. So the sports department is a part of our CVB.
Awesome. Tara?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tara Alfonso. I'm the Director of Sports Marketing and Development for the Branson Chamber and CVB. I've actually been here, which is just crazy to think about, a little over 11 years. Prior to that, I worked in meetings and events for another 10 years. So I've been in this industry, whether it was on the side of hoping to put on events or coordinating on the sidelines, and now working at the CVB for over 20 years. And so, yeah, we actually did not have a sports department when I started the Branson Chamber and CVB. Came in working on the meetings, sales side of things, and now we've grown everything to the point where we need more facilities.
That's awesome. That's a great problem to have. Yeah, Matt?
Sure. Matt Liver, I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Soccerplex. I'm also a board member for Visit Montgomery County, which is our CVB. Prior to coming to the Soccerplex in 2019, I spent 20 years on the rights holder side with Elite Tournaments running events. So I've kind of hit all three facets. I think the only thing I haven't worked for is a housing company at this point, but it feels like I have over the years. So happy to be here.
Awesome. John David?
Good morning. Bright and early here in Phoenix at 8 o'clock in the morning. So just trying to shake the cobwebs off, if you will. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for USA BMX, entering my 21st year of doing that here. We own and operate about 52 events, have an annual membership association of about 50,000. And my primary focus is really, for me personally, is developing our national series schedule and handling the mess that is events these days.
Awesome. So I'll stay with you for our first question, John. We wanted to talk a little bit about the do's and don'ts of conference participation, really how to maximize your ROI, and really just make sure that the investment you're making going to these shows is worthwhile. And so John David, I'll ask you kind of what's one tip or recommendation you have to being successful that you have observed over the years that you try to instill yourself, or something you would share with someone coming to a show for maybe the first time or coming for the first time in a long time?
Yeah, great question, Jason. Yeah, after we knock the rust off, really for me, what I found was substantially helpful was the research in advance, and getting prepared to have successful meetings. For years you kind of go in and without much of a game plan, but that really doesn't work in a lot of cases too. From a rights holder's perspective, you just can't assume that the DMO is going to know who and what you are. So honestly, my biggest tip, what I do is I go in and harvest all the emails of my 42 plus appointments, beg the conference if they could just send me that list, which 9 times out of 10 they don't. So I do the labor myself. I've got a great pre-event email that I've prepared over the years that has a link to my to our RFP. And it also has a link to their local club so that they could potentially connect to that club in advance before they show up. And when I started doing that, that made the meetings so much more meaningful, and each time I put a couple little nuances and tips within that email just to get ready in advance. So if there's anything I would say is especially from a rights holder's perspective, is some good prep and that advanced email to get everybody ready to go.
Yeah, that's valuable information. You're coming prepared. You're making sure that the meeting is going to be valuable for both parties, and you've done your research. And so that's great. All right, we'll shift it over to Shelby.
I think kind of coming off of that, preparation, I think we would all agree is priority. But I think more so, especially from the destination or the facility perspective, it's being prepared to have personalized conversations with each event rights holder. So, I mean, that's everything we've gone so far as we put together sales collateral that is specific to individual sports or facilities. Knowing, if we're meeting with John, he really doesn't care about the swimming pools that we have in Sarasota County. So really just making sure that, you're doing your research about the event, but also when you're cognizant of when you're having those conversations with the rights holders that, you're really talking about what they're interested in specifically.
Yeah, that's great. Very smart. You're maximizing time and getting right to the focus of what you're trying to have a conversation about, which is great. So Matt, from a facility standpoint and from an event right holder standpoint as well, what's one tip that you would provide?
Yeah, I mean, mine's going to come to both sides, and it's be honest with yourself and be honest with whoever you're meeting with. Understand what your event is. If you're a rights holder, know what that means to a community, but also if you're the destination or facility, know what you can and can't do. If, I'm talking with John David and we have a small BMX track here, but I can't hold any of his big events. So I'm not going to go into that meeting, try and sell them on my facility when I know I can't host it. So you just have to be honest with them. And we all go to these shows and sometimes you get stuck with an appointment that you may not have asked for, or it doesn't make sense in advance. So reach out to them ahead of time. I can tell you as a rights holder, anytime you can give back to the rights holder on the floor is like gold to them. Because they're 80 appointments back to back to back. So any 5 seconds to go get a drink of water or go to the bathroom is priceless to them. So if you're just honest with them and say, hey, I don't really think I can help you, but here's my information. So down the road, if you need anything, let me know. A simple conversation like that is still a good appointment for people sometimes. So it doesn't waste their time, but they still get the contact that they were looking for. So just be honest with each other and be honest with yourself about what you can and can't do.
Yeah, great advice. Tara, you're up.
All right. So research, right? I think I've seen that several places and heard it. Definitely key. And then get organized. Like Shelby said, be prepared. I personally have picked up the tip from a friend in the industry to bring a 3-ring binder. And I know it seems kind of old fashioned for some people. It may be a tablet for some people, but it's having that place that I already have information about whomever I'm getting ready to meet with, not only about that person, but about their event and their facilities and so forth. But then also gives me a place to write notes during the conversation. Maybe we're not a fit as a destination with USA BMX right now, for example, but we built a relationship and I feel like I can pick up the phone and call John, or I can call Matt, or I can call Shelby and ask them any kind of questions because I've gotten to know them personally. So, make my notes about them in my book as well. And then I have that also for follow-up later to make sure we're following up.
Yeah, that's a great point. And something I'm touching on, following up. You've made these great interactions, these great connections, but if you don't take advantage of following up with them pretty quickly right afterwards, you may have lost that whole opportunity and that interaction you just had. So that is great advice.
I did have one other just thought on as you're preparing, if, in some of the shows we get mentors, right? And if you have a mentor, don't hesitate to reach out to them. Oftentimes I've worked as a mentor for an ASC and now Sports ETA, and we won't necessarily make the connection in advance, but they're there to help. And I found through my experience that helped me be better prepared. So don't hesitate to reach out to them because they'll help you a lot along the way. And even if it's just making connections with somebody you didn't think you realized you needed to know.
Yeah. Good point. So I'll stay with you then. So what is a pet peeve of yours or a mistake that maybe you made early on in your career? Essentially a don't. What should someone not do when attending the conferences this upcoming season?
So Matt already kind of touched on this one, but be courteous of other people's time, whether it's being courteous of the person's time by being prepared and aware of what you're sitting down to talk to them about, or just being courteous when you see somebody else and it's your time to go. Make sure you're kind of keeping an eye on that clock. And, if you're having a great conversation, plan to, oh, 8 minutes in, I've got 2 minutes left. Let me get their information so we can reconnect later and be, off onto your next appointment before.
Yes, keeping that time schedule and that bell rings, moving on to the next appointment. I've definitely been that guy that's been standing behind someone's shoulder like, hey, it's my turn. It's my turn.
And you don't want to be rude to that person, but you're like, hey, come on, we all.
we have to get to our next meeting, and some of these convention halls are so big that it takes you the full time just to walk from row 100 to row 900. So John David, I'll kick it over to you. What's a don't that you would share with someone? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, definitely what Tara was mentioning, when you're the right sort too, and you're, depending on which conference it is, and you're sitting behind the table and you've got somebody that came and it wasn't their scheduled time, and then you've got somebody right behind them. I mean, inevitably what happens is they come and they just hit you and they're going. I mean, they're fired away, they're selling, they're doing everything. And then you see the person behind you, you know that they're coming, and you're trying to like politely, well, I have another, just don't do that. Try not to do that. Or if you do, if you see an open table, just come up and say, hey, do you have an appointment right now? Can I grab you for a couple of minutes? Just to make sure that you're courteous, because when you're in the seat of the rights holder, it is difficult because, you've got this pressure to try to shuffle these guys along, and that's just not a comfortable position to be in. So that's one of the things that's always my pet peeve.
100%. As an events right holder, are you open to people coming up that maybe don't have an appointment? If it is a valid appointment, to say, hey, do you have an open time slot, or could we maybe, grab a coffee before the next session starts tomorrow? Is that something that you welcome?
I am, and I think every rights holder is maybe a little different. Matt could give you a perspective about it. I don't mind that at all. I mean, I'm there because I want to meet people and create business opportunity. So feel free to come up to me and ask me, if there's a time later on we can meet. That's always a good thing in my book.
Yeah, that's great. Well, since you mentioned Matt, why don't you go ahead? Something that, you would share not to do.
I got a big one, then a little one. The big one is talk about yourself, not other people. This is a very small, tight-knit community. So if you're going to badmouth somebody, that's going to get around pretty quickly. And trust me, that'll come back to bite you and not necessarily them. This is a very transient industry as well. I think most of us on this call have worked for multiple entities at some point in their career. So you're going to move around a lot. So you don't want that reputation of the person that talks bad about everyone else. So just talk about yourself and that's it. And then the little one, if you're going to give something away to a rights holder, it better be able to fit in a carry-on. My friend Ron Eifert and I did this like funny skit a couple years ago where he literally gave me a giant suitcase as like a giveaway like that. If you don't want to put it in your bag to take home, I guarantee you the rights holder doesn't want to put it in their bag and take home. And just be conscious of what it is. Like, it's great if you're going to give me a bottle of whiskey, but that means I got to drink it on the way there if I don't have a check bag. So just be conscious of what you're giving away as a gift.
Yeah, that is hilarious. I know early on in my career, you're handing a bunch of tchotchkes to folks and they're nice enough, but you then walk around the show towards the end and you can see it in the trash basket because they can't bring it. But your first point was a life lesson to apply, just not to conferences, but just life in general, right? Shelby, any don't that you have, or pet peeve or a mistake you made that people can learn from?
So I dropped off, so I apologize if I'm being repetitive.
No worries.
I would echo, and again, I'm sure this is brought up again, but Matt touched on it at first, of just the honesty factor. And it really goes both ways, from a destination standpoint, being honest about what you can and can't accommodate. And then from there, kind of taking the consultative approach of how you will, handle those potential issues or concerns, rather than, kind of pulling the wool over their eyes and just pretending like, something isn't a problem. And then the same goes, from the rights holder perspective of just being honest about the actual impact and the history of the event. Just because you may think it seems like a smaller event, sometimes those are still certainly valuable to destinations depending on time of year and all of that. So they just need to make sure that they're working with the correct information. And then I'll also say, and this may have been what Matt said first, but being cognizant outside of appointments and of your behavior and professionalism, even in the evening time. We'll just leave it at that.
Yes, because what you do outside, although it's not technically work, it's always work when you're at a show, and the conversation will be had the next day of who did what at the evening reception, for sure. So maintaining professionalism.
You don't want to be the topic of conversation.
Yeah, that is very true. Very true. So moving on, really wanted to just share with everyone else on the call. You can feel free to put in a question into the chat. We'll do a little question and answer at the end. If something comes up or you want some more clarification on something, please just send it over in the chat. So next, I really wanted to get into a little bit more of what is success to you after these conferences, right? There are, I think, 6 sports tourism conferences going to happen within the next 6 months. It's an investment from not only from the destination side, it's investment of time for the event organizer side. So just kind of go through what your focus is, what's your goal. And I think they're going to be similar, but it'd be interesting to see everyone's perspective. So I'll turn it over to Tara.
All right. Well, I think ultimately we'll all probably say very similar from a destination perspective. We want to come back with qualified RFPs. So that means, really getting to know the people who are there. Measuring success can come in other ways as well. And maybe it's getting with somebody that you've been hoping to make a connection with that you just haven't had the opportunity to. And maybe you've talked to them on the phone, but getting that time together, to build a relationship further, if you feel like you're, have potential business and such. So every time it's going to be slightly different, but ultimately keyword qualified RFPs back for our destination.
Yeah. So how do you have someone that evaluates, or is it maybe yourself to say, hey, I've gone to the show a couple of times, or really haven't gotten any RFPs back, or haven't generated any direct business, that you scratch that conference off the list? Or do you look at that from a financial standpoint and return on investment once you get back, or maybe 6 months down the line?
Yes. Yeah, we do. We evaluate, which shows we're getting the most bang for your buck, if you may. We want to make sure, yes, that we are getting ROI from each one. So.
Great. All right. So Matt, how about yourself? What's your focus and goal when you attend these shows, both from your days with Elite, but now with Maryland Sportsplex?
Yeah, I would say I'm probably the outlier here. So obviously when I was with Elite, it was finding new destinations. But after doing shows for 10 years, there's probably not a venue that I probably couldn't name that's in the US, having talked to everybody or go to visit. So there was just building relationships. And I think that's more of what I do here, and kind of, not to be braggy, but we don't have very many open slots to fill new events. So we're going to shows. I'm not necessarily even looking for RFPs sometimes. It's really just feeling out what's going on in the industry. It's education. So going to the ancillary things, not just going to the meetings and appointments. There's a lot that goes on to these shows that some people just don't take advantage of. And I think they're missing out the whole point of the actual conference. It's not just to pick up an RFP. Sometimes it's to go learn some new piece of the environment. Like most people knew nothing about esports, and then recently almost every show you go to has some aspect of esports to talk about. So if you're not doing that type of stuff, you're not fully taking advantage of what these shows are for. And then a lot of it's just networking, relationship building. It's talking with somebody like John David about how they run events to figure out how we can do something differently. I mean, we've talked to each other so many times on the phone about random things that, you don't have that. You can't do that unless you build a relationship at these shows. So it's really doing that and just getting to talk to people and find out best practices, or somebody had a cool event and they're like, hey, you should talk to this person. Things like that, I think, are really a goal, and it's hard to put metrics to it from our side. But it's one you can walk away from it and just have that feeling like, yeah, this was good, or no, it wasn't.
Right. Yeah, that's can you speak a little bit more about the time and effort it does put to put together the educational sessions? You're on the board of Sports ETA, and I know that's something that's really important to them. So the amount of time, I've seen it on the back end to make sure that these sessions are valuable. Just give a quick snippet on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. It's typically when, we'll take Sports ETA as an example. When that show ends in March or April, whatever it is that year, the planning for the next year starts already. So we're already trying to figure out what topics we're going to talk about, what speakers we want. We'll put out a call for like a request for speakers. So if somebody has something they want to talk about, we'll put that out to vet those against what our goals are. We're trying to find what's relevant in the industry at the moment, and obviously that's ever changing. So we're constantly having to keep a pulse on it. And from a Sports ETA's perspective, we've kind of shifted in how we operate. Now we have people on staff where that's their specific job, which for us, I think puts us ahead from different shows. And but every show has some aspect to that, and they're all trying to do the education piece. And I think it's super necessary, because if we don't make the industry better for everyone, it's going to be harder for us individually. So if you're a destination, you want the rights holders to have the best knowledge to run an event. And if you're a rights holder, you want the destinations to have the best knowledge of what it is to run an event so they can help you help themselves. So the education piece, I think, is almost more important sometimes than the actual appointment setting.
Yep. And especially with folks that are just breaking into the industry, it's a great way to hear from your peers and learn beyond the networking part. And I know you mentioned John David, so I'm going to kick it over to him next. But, for example, I got on the phone with John David just to say hello, get reintroduced, and just network and talk and see what he was up to. And he gave a tidbit of information that, which is his Stay and Save program, which they do, that I'm now implementing with a wrestling tournament organizer that's looking for ways to make it more beneficial for his participants. And it's things like that, tidbits of information that you will get at these shows that it's really hard to put a value on. So yeah, John David, same thing for you on your focus, your goals, what you hope to accomplish by attending these shows.
It may sound a little different, a little interesting. Honest to God, my goal going in is to make every single person that I meet with a fan of our sport. You get these lists and you look at them, and a lot of times that natural reaction is, oh, I don't have a lot of good qualified meetings or this and that. And I don't think that's true at all. I think that, especially from a rights holders perspective, I think really for all of us, whether it's a housing company or whatnot, if you can make them a fan of your sport or your company or yourself, I mean, that's really what moving the needle is all about. For us, there are so many cases out of the 42 odd meetings that we'll have at each of the shows. Really a third of them don't have a BMX track. And I love those meetings because we have zero opportunity to do business. But if you look at our national series schedule for 2021, I've got 4 different destinations that when I met them 4 years ago or 5 years ago at a conference, we had nothing to talk about. But what I did is I flipped the script and I started talking about, hey, let's build a BMX track in your community. We'll backstop it by guaranteeing you a national event if you build a national caliber facility. And so for us, we're using sports tourism as growth of sport. And all of a sudden it's Tara connecting us, with, Parks and Recreation, but she supports it because she knows that we have successful events because of the relationship we have. And it really just creates a snowball effect. So anytime I hear somebody, at the after hours functions about their bad schedule or something, I always challenge that, and there's no bad schedule. You just have to go out there and make them a fan of your organization or your sport, and you really can move the needle that way.
Awesome. Yeah, every opportunity is a good one. You just have to look at it in that perspective. So that's awesome you do that. All right, Shelby, you're the last one here.
I think everybody's kind of touched on everything. I do think that we could all agree that there is a sort of energy that you get from attending these shows. Like when you get back, you're super motivated and energized to dive into a particular project or pursue a certain lead. So I think that rolling into what everybody has said, really utilizing these shows for multiple staff members to kind of get that sense of energy and education, and of course the networking and introductions is super important. I know There are some organizations that they kind of have, their go-to person that you see at every single show. And I think if you're lucky enough to have multiple people on your team, it's super valuable to be able to send, different faces and allow them to kind of get that benefit from attending the shows personally.
Yep. It's really hard to do it yourself. I'm getting some feedback here. Sorry. Oh, that's better. Thanks, Shelby. So one other point that didn't get brought up that I wanted to make sure I mentioned, just from a business development and sales standpoint, is, when you have those opportunities for meetings, and let's say it's allotted 7 minutes, it's really not advantageous for someone to go in and do their full sales pitch in 7 minutes. But if you take the elements of what Tara mentioned and Shelby mentioned, everyone has, you're prepared, you're speaking specifically to what is important to them. It's really an opportunity to become introduced to that person, understand what makes them tick, how they operate, and then the follow-up and the, finding how you guys can work together in the future is beneficial. But that was always something that I made a mistake early on in my career, and someone took me under their wing and said, hey, you're never going to be successful if you just come in guns a-blazing like a bull in a china shop trying to gain their business in 7 minutes. It's never going to work. So that was something I did want to add. At this point, I did want to see if there are any questions. I don't know if there's any in the chat, Laura. If not, you can ask one, or Shannon, who is the president of our company. If anything has come up, or if the panelists want to share anything in addition.
Well, not yet in the chat. If there were, I'd let them go first, but I wrote down a few questions. If you guys don't mind, I'll just start. And if anybody else does have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll call them out right after everybody's done answering. I know a few of you guys have touched on this a little bit, and Matt, you were actually speaking to this before we jumped on the call with everybody, but if somebody's new to the industry, or they've got a limited budget and they're trying to figure out, well, what conference or conferences are best for me? What's my best fit? Obviously, it's different for everybody. Events rights holders, CVB, sports commissions, destinations, everybody is different. What are some of the questions that you guys ask yourselves to see if it's the best conference for you? What are the different elements that you guys look at from an organizational standpoint to vet these conferences and figure out if it's right for you? I'll let anybody that wants to jump in and answer, please feel free.
Sure, I'll go first. I think it goes back to the question about what your goal is. So if you are strictly there for appointments and RFPs, they're all pretty much the same for you. If you're there for education, there's going to be ones that are better for that. If you're there for networking, there's ones that are better for that. So you have to be able to go in and look at the whole picture. So it's looking at that full schedule of what's going on around the conference outside of the appointments and figure out what meets your goals best. And then I would honestly, if it's your first time going to a conference, call each of the conference presenters and be like, hey, convince me I should go to this show, and make them sell it to you so you can kind of get a feel of what that show is. And then also contact your peers. Like, John David said it, Jason said it, reaching out to somebody just to talk about whatever it is. Like, you're going to come into an organization, unless you're the first time they've ever had a sports department, somebody there has had to do something on a sports related. They can connect you with somebody that does something in your community that you can call and reach that. You'll find this industry is very friendly, and we're always willing to answer questions and help out. And, we all like taking somebody under our wing and teaching them like the ways of sports tourism. It's just kind of the way this place works. And I think asking questions is your best way to figure that out for you.
That's great advice. Very true. Does anybody else have anything to add to that before I go on?
Yeah, I'll kind of echo what Matt said. I mean, I think the other thing that you want to think about is it's important to stay relevant. And I think you kind of throughout the year need to strategically time what conferences you're attending. If you only attend conferences in the back end of the year, there's a big piece to being relevant. The other thing that I'd say is we have the potential to see kind of a cataclysmic shift in conferences and what's happening due to technology. I mean, you look at the Huddle Up Group and what those guys have created with the Sports Index tool. When we talk about research in advance, that tool alone, it can be huge pre-conference, but it does kind of beg the question, what is technology going to do to change the landscape of conference. We all did, I'm sure we all did these virtual conferences, which were pretty successful. So it's a real interesting time. But again, I really think relevance, within the time frame of the year is important as well.
To jump on the tail end of that, I know I'm already talked, but oh well. John made me think of something when he talked about timing. The other thing is location. Especially with smaller destinations, they can't afford necessarily to fly across country. So if you're looking for something in the Midwest, look for a conference that's in the Midwest. You'll have many more people where it's drivable for them that you can talk to, as opposed to if it's on the West Coast, you're not going to get as many East Coast destinations coming out there to look at it. So the location of the conference may also be important to you.
Great call.
Great point.
Great point. Perfect. Okay, nothing in the chat yet, so I'm gonna go on to my next question. This is a fun one. So you guys have mentioned a few of these. Jason mentioned the follow-up. Somebody else mentioned it. I know you guys mentioned gifts. Just out of curiosity, what's the best follow-up that you've gotten? Obviously, you want to stand out. You meet a million people at these things. It's sometimes hard to remember unless you're one of those people that can remember everything about everyone. So what's the best follow-up that you've gotten from somebody that really stands out in your mind that you're like, you know what, this was awesome, or the best gift or anything of that nature? I just love to hear about that stuff.
From a destination standpoint, this isn't what I've gotten, but one thing I've learned when you go to appointments is, if things are going well and you feel like there's a potential to do business together, but you're at the end of your call, for example, or appointment, for example, just be courteous and ask the person, when is a good time to follow up with you? Don't just plan to follow up with them on Monday when you're back in the office or Wednesday when you're back in the office. Ask them, because they may have events coming up that honestly, they're not going to be able to get with you for another month. They might say, oh, thank you so much. I've received that feedback from the organizers. They appreciate me actually taking that time and then putting it on my calendar and actually following up at that time. That would be my tip on that one.
Yeah, that's great. And that sets expectations internally with yourself as well, because you may, hey, we had a great conversation. I emailed and never got back to me. And then you send another follow-up, and then you're getting to the point where you're being a bother or a burden on
right.
the person.
In your mind you are,
left.
but in their mind, they're just busy doing what they're supposed to be doing, taking care of their event. And they're like, I just don't have time right now for that.
Yep,
right.
Yep. I'm going to steal that.
I think you'd be kind of astounded too. It sometimes the lack of follow-up. I know I am, and I think that's one of the biggest pieces is standing out, and this isn't exactly a follow-up example, but just an example of unique execution of the 7-minute opportunity. We had a destination, actually, guys in CTAC came over, and during the meeting, they had set up in advance a FaceTime with a BMX Hall of Famer, a guy that we haven't spoken to in years that's from the Tacoma area, one of the all-time winningest BMX riders ever. They show up at the meeting, hey, we got somebody you want to talk to real quick. And also they put their phone up, and it's Gary Ellis. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You got Gary Ellis on the phone? Like, hey, we're not playing here, guys. We want to do business. We got number one. Tell him, Gary, tell him you need to come and do a national, here at River Valley BMX. And I mean, what a unique way of taking that time and that exchange of knowing my sport, understanding something that's poignant to us, and just hitting it home. And that, to me, that's always the stuff that stands out. And it's just that extra effort and something that's a little bit unique.
Yeah, I would say on that same note, I recently helped somebody move a CrossFit event from a location because of COVID. And he said that the best thing he got out of some of the interactions he had is someone that could speak the language to him. So, especially BMX is probably one of those events, and kind of what you were just saying, someone that knows your sport and can speak the language, it goes a long way. And then as far as a follow-up, the thing that always gets me, and this is definitely a personal thing that I feel, is a handwritten note afterwards, like somebody just sending a thank you card because they took the time to actually handwrite it. And even if they just put one thing they took away from the conversation they had with you in that, to me, that says they paid attention. They valued that 7 minutes they had with me, that they took 10 minutes to handwrite a card and mail it. It's a kind of a lost art these days. And I have a box in my office of every handwritten note that I've ever received from somebody. So it just goes a long way with me.
I'm with you, Matt. I think that's so important. I love that you still have all those.
It is fun to actually open up a piece of mail these days that's addressed to you, that is not spam or salesy or whatever it may be. So
It's
I
not a bill.
understand. Yeah, not a bill. I mean, the joy I see on my kids' faces when they get a letter, it's awesome. So there's a lot of value to that. Shelby, sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was actually going to use that one. And I know that's something that I feel like everybody wants to do and intends on doing it because they know the impact of it, but it frequently gets, lost in the shuffle. So what I have tried to do in the past is actually bring them and then work on it on the airplane back. So it's like still top of mind. I can remember, the personal conversation, and I'm on a plane. There's not much else I can do. Writing a note or a letter is a good activity for that. So yeah, I agree. Handwritten note is definitely impactful.
Genius. What a great idea. Wow, I'm taking that. That's a great idea.
And it's much more efficient than trying to write the emails on your laptop on the plane. The space is tight these days, and it's hard to type anything anymore on the plane. Yeah, that's great. Well, did you have another question, Laura? There anything that popped up on the chat?
No, I've dominated enough. I don't see anything in the chat. But if anybody else has any questions and they didn't want to put it in the chat because it's too long, you want to speak up, feel free. But that's all I have right now. Yeah. Well, I definitely value this conversation, and these things are valuable pieces of information to utilize moving forward. The one last piece of information I would give is make sure you attend all the sessions that you possibly can. Go and participate. Because while I've never really closed a deal on the golf course, although that's something that people say, there's definitely opportunities to close deals at the after hour events and the social events when you're going out and experiencing the destinations. And I know sometimes people skip those because they don't think it's worth their time, or they want to work on something that they've been putting off all day. But really attending those sessions, those community-based events, is where you create the relationships and you get to grow not only as a professional, but you get to experience some really cool things. And that's something that these the conferences do really well. So I just want to thank you all for your time. I know how busy you are. I'm excited to see everyone in person moving forward. And like I said, we will send this out to everyone to forward on. And I think there's some really valuable information to people that not only are rookies, but are veterans in our space too, that they can use because they haven't been traveling. So I do want to thank you for your time, and I appreciate the folks that have come on to watch. And thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Goodbye, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jason.
Bye. Thank you.